Alrighty, welcome to episode 11 of the Snowball Effect. I'm here with Zachary Elias. Zach, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. How's it going?
It's going great. Really appreciate having you on. So Zach is the director of partnerships at Plobal Apps, an awesome Shopify software product. And he's done a lot of other cool things. He's worked at Shopify, so there's a lot to unpack here. So my first question for you, Zach, is how did you get into this space in the beginning? How did you get into the e-commerce world? How do you land a job at Shopify? One of the most looked up upon companies ever. How did you get here?
Yeah, definitely didn't plan it. It was it was very, very random. I was in Ottawa for school and I wanted to be an Indigenous rights lawyer. And that's what I was studying to do. And in my fourth year of university, I kind of got to this point where I was like, wow, I feel like I'm probably like kind of part of the problem being like a white male trying to go in and fix this stuff. So I'm like in the fourth year, 3 years of my life in, I'm like having this moment. I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. So at the time I was finishing school, I was also working in like a couple of bars and doing sales in like for telecom, like selling phones and stuff like that.
Nice.
And I had a customer come in. Her name is Beth, and she is still like a pretty close friend of mine. But she came in, she was looking to like upgrade or get like a new iPhone or something like that. And Beth was telling me all about, her day. She was working at this company called Shopify. Being in Ottawa, I knew about Shopify, as everyone did. You either worked at Shopify or the government if you live in Ottawa. So yeah, we were just like speaking for a very long time while she was there in the store. And when she left, I went back into her account and just like cold emailed her. I was like, listen, what you were talking about sounded really cool. I have no idea about any of this, but I'm like very interested to learn a little bit more. So we spoke a little bit. And then I applied and I joined in like the support organization. So just like banging out phone calls. But I was just listening to Caitlin Teed's chat with you, and yeah, very, very similar story. Joined in the support org and then became immediately interested in like the partners ecosystem. um, I think when people think about Shopify and like how Shopify powers entrepreneurship, essentially you always think about the merchants, but like the ecosystem around Shopify on like the partner side is like just as impressive and just as exciting, right? There are so many people like yourself, right, who've built like businesses out of this e-commerce industry. So I kind of bounced in a few roles on the App Store team, in a couple operation roles, and then kind of ended my time there on like a business development and payment partnerships role, before migrating over to Plobal about a year and a bit ago.
Very cool. So I'm super curious. What did Beth tell you that day she walked into the store that had you so hooked on the idea of working for Shopify?
I feel like part of it like was definitely just how excited she was about where she worked and like like it when she was also in that support role, and I feel like support roles kind of have a bad rap of being like nonstop kind of like banging out phone calls, like a lot of like
Yeah,
being yelled at and stuff like that. But she was just like genuinely excited about a lot of it, right? And just kind of telling me about the growth of the company and how everything has been, how she's enjoyed and learned so much there. um, and like I remember seeing that exact role like before I met Beth. It was called guru back at the time, and I was like, oh, there's no way I'm a guru. Like that's just like the highest like title, right? Like what that means, you're like an expert in something.
right.
So there's no way I can apply to this. But we made it work.
Very cool. So then you went from that to partnerships and then business development at the end. How long were you working in Shopify for total?
It was about 4.5 years.
Okay. And did things change a lot in your time there? Like, how was it in comparison to when you started?
Yeah, I think when it started, or when I joined, specifically when I left that support role and joined in like the partnerships side of things, everything was still very scrappy, right? Like a lot of the projects we were working on, um, as cliche as it is, like you had to wear like a lot of hats, right? Like you were kind of bouncing around doing many different types of roles. And as the company kind of scaled, like the roles became a little bit more defined, everything became a little bit more verticalized, which that has to happen at scale. But I kind of enjoyed that like scrappiness, right? And I think that's like one of the main reasons I ended up jumping over to Plobal, which yeah, I think I'm super happy to still be in the ecosystem. It's definitely a lot scrappier, and it's like borderline chaotic sometimes, but it's great.
Yeah, so 4.5 years at Shopify, and then like you just said, you moved over to Plobal, which is, I don't know, obviously within the ecosystem as well. How did that go about? How did you decide to leave Shopify?
Yeah, so I wasn't looking. I was really enjoying like that role I was in while I was at Shopify, the payment partnerships and business development role. Um, but I was kind of like reintroduced to the CEO, a tool. I knew a tool when I was like on the App Store team. We crossed paths a couple of times before, and I was sort of reintroduced to him through a good friend of mine, and then also through someone who I consider to be like a bit of a mentor in the e-com space. And we were just chatting about how Plobal was looking. There's a lot of traction. Things were really growing, but they basically didn't have a go-to-market team. It was everything was inbound. We had like 1, 2 salespeople at the time that were just handling inbounds from the Shopify App Store. And a tool was like, yeah, like I think there's something here, like we can really, really scale this. So started chatting a little bit informally about potentially leveraging like partnerships as a vertical for that growth. And obviously those conversations became a little bit more formal to the point where like we're having this conversation now. So that's kind of happened. That's how it happened. It was like super organic, super natural. And yeah.
Cool. So tell us about what you're working at there now. So I know you went in for partnerships.
Mhm.
How is everything there now?
Yeah. So it's when I joined as the only employee in North America. Um, the company, like a tool and the CTO and everybody is based out in India, specifically in Pune. And the idea was that we were going to like kickstart a North American go-to-market hub. So started with me. We brought in a head of sales, and we have kind of scaled out the North American team. I think there's like 12 or 13 of us right now, which is super exciting. Most of us are here in Toronto. There's a couple of us in Ottawa, where I was before as well. But yeah, so it's been like an incredible year. It's been crazy in terms of like growth, not just from the company's perspective, but also like our team, right? So really scaling that out, and it's been super exciting.
So just for the people who aren't familiar with Plobal, what exactly does Plobal do?
Yeah, I guess I should have started with that, eh? But yeah, Flowable is essentially a mobile commerce platform. So we take Shopify stores and turn them into mobile apps, and we kind of approach that a little differently. I think when people think about a mobile app, the word like experience comes to mind quite a bit, right? It's like a better experience than mobile web. It's a better UX UI experience, etc. I don't disagree with those things. I think like those are all very valid, but I think the real reason brands want a mobile app is because it's like a really strong marketing channel, right? You're able to kind of funnel in your customers into this channel that you own, and you're able to engage with them via push notifications. And for the most part, we see push notifications are kind of outperforming um, email and SMS. And I mean, the idea isn't to replace email or SMS, of course. It's about communicating with your customers the way they want to be communicated with. But yeah, I think we've really kind of figured out how to turn a mobile app into like your strongest performing sales channel.
Really cool. So for a merchant who wants to go ahead and launch a mobile app, like let's say I had a store, how self-serve would that process be? Like, would I just download Plobal from the App Store, use your in-app at like page building tools, and then would I be able to launch on the like Apple App Store all from within the product, or do I need like to submit something? I'm just not familiar with mobile app building in general. So how
Yeah,
does the process look like for merchants?
yeah, for sure. So it is you download Plobal from the Shopify App Store, and very much like you said, right? There's like a page builder in there. You can definitely do it yourself. We have like a team of designers that will design and build the app in usually in about 48 hours. So 2 days, you should have the first version of what your app will look like. And depending on the size of the brand, depending on the integrations and stuff like that. That can add a day or two to that build process as well, but we kind of help you through that whole thing. So design, build, and then submitting to the app store. That whole process, or the app stores I should say, that whole process is usually complete within 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Mhm.
And even getting approved for the App Store is
Yeah,
pretty
yeah,
easy.
that's like half of those 2 weeks. Like Apple is like 3 to 5 days, Google's in around the same, but
Oh,
yeah,
not bad.
the whole process is about 2
Oh,
weeks.
so it's really not too much heavy lifting of a project. I would imagine launching an app would be like the biggest project ever, but I guess that's the whole point of Plobal, is to make
That's
it
exactly,
simple.
yeah,
Very,
exactly.
very cool. Cool, man. Well, I appreciate all of that. So now, last question for you. As someone who works, in the weeds of Shopify and e-commerce and has a ton of experience and cool insights, what would you say is one big trend that's happening right now that people in the direct-to-consumer e-commerce space should know about?
Yeah, I think there's like a couple things that have kind of been top of mind for me when we're thinking about like e-com trends. So I'll kind of like rapid fire a couple that have just been, yeah, top of mind, and then I'll chat about a little bit about like a larger one there. But I think it's impossible to talk about trends in 2022 without talking about NFTs and how that's going to come into play in
Definitely.
e-commerce. Candidly, like I'm not an expert. I don't even know if I'm like a huge fan of NFTs, or I just don't know enough about them. But I think like there's some cool conversations happening around like how you can leverage, or how brands can leverage NFTs from like a loyalty perspective, maybe
Yep.
like, yeah, via like access to certain gated collections, or like even events and stuff like hosted by that brand. I think I think that's kind of like a cool trend that we're seeing a little bit of for sure. Um, I think something that's a little bit more, yeah, I guess like the larger trend that I'd kind of focus on is just like the shift from, well, like cost per acquisition, like to acquire customers, it's gone up quite a bit, right? I think it's like 60% over the past 5 years or so. And I think that's really forcing brands to um, kind of look at, increasing the LTV for some of their customers, and then also like that retention play, right? Like how do you keep your current customer spending and spending more? Um, I think, super biased, like that's something that we think about all the time at Plobal, because that's something that mobile apps like really, really address. But yeah, I think just that, how are you able to get these customers to continue to spend more? How do they stay engaged? And I think we are trying to solve like a big chunk of that here at Global. When you are able to get a customer into your app, on average, we see that the LTV increases by 20%. And there's even like some verticals like consumables, right? Like teas and coffees and stuff like that. We see that the repeat purchase rate for those types of products or those types of brands are like 40 to 50% higher than what you would see on just like your mobile web. So I think being able to just kind of capture your customers into this channel, engage with them via push notifications, and just yeah, just like increase the LTV is something that a lot of brands have been speaking about quite a lot lately. And I think that's something that we focus on too. So again, very biased because that's what I see every day. That's what I do every day. But I think that's the biggest trend right now.
No, that makes a ton of sense. And I mean, it makes so much sense that Plobal would be a huge retention play. Obviously, if someone's downloading an app for a brand, like a direct to consumer brand, they're a huge fan of it, most likely. And even if they weren't and they just downloaded it for like maybe a different incentive, once they have it on their phone, I'm sure, well, correct me if I'm wrong, but does Plobal let you maybe remove friction from the checkout experience altogether, like from a push notification to a purchase, because it has like card information saved? I'm just thinking out loud here, but I would
Yeah,
imagine it kind of makes it easier to continue shopping as well.
exactly. And I think you actually touched on a good point, right? Like the when you launch an app, for sure, the first people who are going to be downloading that app are probably going to be the same people who have like signed up for your loyalty program, or maybe they've opted into SMS, right? Like you're more loyal customers. But what an app is also really good at is kind of converting those like casual shoppers into like loyal customers, right? And I think like that's a really big piece of it. If you listen to like any of Nike's earnings, right, at the front of Nike's strategy right now, and it has been, is D2C, and at the front of D2C, it's their mobile app. And it's because of how that app has been able to help shape those like drop shoppers into like turning them into real loyal customers. So I just kind of wanted to address that too. But yeah, it's also like very frictionless when you're using a native app to check out, or even if it's like a push notification that has a CTA that brings you straight to checkout, right? I think there's a lot of ways that we can get creative and really like incentivize those sales to really try and drive growth.
Totally. You guys are on the forefront of retention.
At least that's what we like to think, for sure. For sure.
Well, Zach, thank you so much for coming on. This was a really fun episode.
Thanks, Noah. Talk to you soon.